There once lived a man whose wife loved him dearly. She worked tirelessly to make him happy, cooking his favorite meals and caring for him in every possible way. But despite her devotion, the man felt only disappointment. They had no children, and as the years passed, he grew bitter. One day he made a cruel decision. He divorced his faithful wife and married another woman, leaving his first wife alone, heartbroken and penniless. Time passed, and the man eagerly awaited the day his new wife would give him a child. When she finally became pregnant, his heart filled with hope. He imagined a strong, healthy son who would carry on his name. But when the baby was born, horror replaced his joy. The child had no arms, no legs, and no body at all. It was only a head. His wife recoiled in disgust and refused to look at it. The man, overwhelmed with shame and anger, placed the head in a sack, carried it to a distant road, and abandoned it there. Soon after, a group of travelers came along the road and heard strange sounds coming from the sack. The head called out desperately for help, begging to be freed. Startled and frightened, the travelers opened the sack and jumped back in shock. They wanted to flee, but the head pleaded with them not to leave him to die. He asked them to carry him to the nearest town and leave him at a tea shop. The travelers, though uneasy, agreed and brought the head to a tea seller. The tea seller stared at the head in disbelief. He wanted nothing to do with such a strange creature, but as he moved to throw it out, the head spoke to him. It promised that if the tea seller would care for him and give him food, he would make the man rich. Intrigued and hopeful, the tea seller agreed. From that day forward, the head gave him wise advice about buying and selling tea. The tea seller followed every word, and soon his business flourished. He became one of the wealthiest merchants in town. Meanwhile, the king of that land had announced that his daughter was ready to marry. Many young men came forward, hoping to win her hand, but the king set impossible conditions. He demanded gifts that were rare or difficult to obtain, and none of the suitors could meet his demands. When the head heard about this, he saw an opportunity. He told the tea seller to go to the king and ask what he wanted in exchange for his daughter's hand. The tea seller nervously approached the palace and asked the question. The king smiled slyly and said he wanted a camel, but not just any camel. It had to be a strong male camel with perfect teeth that could walk into the palace, greet the king, and speak to him in his own language. The tea seller returned home, convinced the task was impossible. But the head reassured him and instructed him to go to the camel market. There, the head carefully chose a camel and told the tea seller to bring it to the palace. Trembling with fear, the tea seller obeyed. When he led the camel into the throne room, the king laughed mockingly, certain that the challenge had not been met. But then, to everyone's astonishment, the camel lifted its head and greeted the king in perfect, respectful language. The room fell silent. The king, bound by his word, had no choice but to agree to the marriage. The next day, the tea seller brought the head to the palace in a bag. When the king asked to see the groom, the tea seller nervously opened the bag, and the head introduced himself. The guests gasped in horror. The princess wept bitterly. The king regretted his hasty promise, but he was a man of honor and could not go back on his word. The marriage ceremony took place, and the couple was led to their bedroom. Once alone, something miraculous happened. The head transformed into a handsome young man with a strong body, arms, and legs. The princess stopped crying and looked at him in wonder. She fell deeply in love with him. The next morning, when the king and queen anxiously knocked on the door, they were shocked to see their daughter smiling and her husband standing beside her as a complete, handsome man. Joy filled the palace. A year later, the princess gave birth to a healthy son. The king, overjoyed and grateful, handed over his kingdom to his son-in-law. The tea seller was richly rewarded and became the most successful merchant in the land. But far away, the young king's father lived in misery. He and his second wife had no more children. They had grown old and poor, with no one to care for them.